This is the, can I go? Okay, this is the building and zoning. This is the infrastructure meeting for July 17th, the month of July. We have yet to schedule our next infrastructure meeting, but we'll do that before the August business meeting. To be held during August, but not necessarily before the business meeting. On our agenda today, I could start with the Narberth Avenue Bridge, which is the currently, or I guess maybe you can update us, Sean, on what's happening with the bridge.
We met on site with myself and Director of Public Works, with our bridge project manager, Benoni, personnel from Amtrak and from Buckley Construction, who is the contractor that does a lot of this kind of work on these kinds of facilities in southeastern PA. And so it was interesting to hear him talk about all of the nuances of the job site and the risks and the things we have to be careful about. And I'm glad it's not me operating the heavy equipment, because I'm sure I would kill myself or somebody else doing it. But it's a complex project to install the vertical shielding and remove the supporting structures for the sidewalks, largely because it can only be done during certain limited times of day, and those happen at night when the trains aren't running. So it is a nighttime project. We're hoping to get it done in a couple of weekends, but there were no promises were made. We're getting the specifications from our bridge team from Benoni. We just got the estimate, I think, in the last 48 hours from Amtrak about what their cost would be simply to have personnel coordinate the access to Amtrak property and to coordinate the safety measures that need to be in place when you do that kind of work. And that estimate came in at over $100,000 just to Amtrak for their personnel. So we still think that we're looking at a $200,000 to $250,000 final price tag. We'll know more once we get the estimate from Buckley. So that's that component, and that's going to proceed with all measured as hastily as we can and as safely as we can, because we are required to complete that within 6 months of the notice that we received in February. So we're getting up against the deadline.
Will the installation of the vertical shielding have any impact on the residents, the businesses, the traffic or pedestrian or traffic circulation, or does it all happen at night down from below?
It happens all at night from above, but unless you live close enough to the bridge to hear that work being done at nighttime, you probably aren't going to be affected. But we have residents in those apartments in South Narberth, and there are residents in the Lower Marion on North Narberth Avenue, I'm sure, are going to be impacted by the work. And the bridge will be obviously closed during the work.
Okay. So the bridge will close again for some period of time.
Yeah, overnight.
And how many nights? You said 2 weekends?
They thought tentatively 2 weekends, but that's subject to
2 weekends to remove the sidewalk, and then another 2 weekends for the...
Oh, okay.
So it could be 4 or 5 days over the course of a month.
Yeah.
Well, no, 8 or 10, right?
No, it could be 4 weekends over the course of the month.
Okay. Yeah.
That was their best.
It's likely the bridge would be closed for those 4 weekends.
Correct. Well,
Including
overnight.
Overnight, so not on, it won't be closed Saturday or Sunday.
No, they'll be off the bridge and reopened.
Right.
So we only have a few weeks before we hit that 6-month deadline.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
What's the status of the new bridge?
Our point right now is beginning the right-of-way acquisition process, which we can't begin until the environmental clearance that was originally obtained for the bridge work in general. And any project anywhere that uses federal money has to get environmental clearance. And in this case, it's a categorical exception. And that's basically states that the project is not going to have any environmental impacts. So it's not going to discharge bad things in the environment or disproportionately affect certain persons over others, and a couple of other measures it has to demonstrate. That clearance was originally obtained and has expired because this project has been, in design and engineering since 2008. So they're going back in and reapplying for that, and that has to be certified by PennDOT before we can send offer letters to the 6 property owners. Now, fortunately, the borough is one of those property owners.
Who's they, Sean? You said they have to reply. Who was the they?
Property owners?
No, you said they have to reapply for the EPA certification.
Oh, our bridge project team is reapplying
Oh, they
for
do
the
it,
categorical exclusion, through PennDOT. We're waiting for that approval, and once that's done, the right-of-way acquisition process can begin in earnest.
Is there anything that council or the public can do to help speed the bridge up?
It's very important that it maintain kind of awareness in the political and community sphere, that everyone's aware that there are construction dollars allocated in the Pennsylvania Transportation Improvement Program in fiscal year 2020. That's a very good sign. That means that PennDOT and DVRPC have agreed to have dollars kind of waiting in the queue to pay for the construction. That needs to stay in place. And that's incredibly important. And the Transportation Improvement Program is done on, and Matt knows the program better than I, so if I say something wrong, please jump in. It's done on a every 2-year basis. And that reauthorization process is going to start later in this year for the reauthorization next year. So when we're around the cycle around to next June, those dollars had better stay where they had already been allocated. And there should be no pullback on the priority of this project for all of the reasons you all know very well.
Okay.
That we all know very well.
Okay.
And I think we are in a really bad position financially to have to keep spending dollars on an asset that we're not going to have for much longer. Because it's not safe, because we need to protect public safety. And we're already $300,000 in the hole from work done in 2011. And we're being forced, our hand is being forced to do more work on this bridge that is some of the work that we're going to do with this bridge is going to limit our demolition costs and project down the road, because the shielding we're putting up is going to be effective, and we would have installed that anyway to do the demo of the bridge. But before you feel good about that, now that it's out of scope of the project, we're not getting the 95 cents on the dollar reimbursement. So that's our...
I'm sure the Business Association would love to communicate to elected officials outside of the borough just the impact that any stalling of the bridge would have on the local economy and independent small businesses. So that was a good question. I know people have asked me, who do I call? Is it Mary Jo Daly? Is it
What's the answer?
Dean? What's the answer? Right, I don't know, but whatever that direction is.
What are the
Is it our commissioners? Is it county or commissioners?
I mean, the Union Avenue Bridge is closing now for reconstruction. In Inwood.
Okay.
Between Montgomery Avenue and Bala Avenue. I mean, between Conshohocken State Road and Bala Avenue.
By the post office.
By the post office in Bala. So somehow they managed to to get to that finish line.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder who
is
who's
it?
responsible for that.
Is it the county commissioners? Is it Mary Jo?
What level
Is it Madeline?
What level is the administration of this being managed?
Unfortunately, I can't give you the 100% answer. I can't tell you go talk to this person.
Right.
He or she gets it done, because it doesn't work that
But
way.
so the agencies are Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, PennDOT. Okay, so
It's a partnership between elected officials and their roles and their contacts, and
Sure.
how you can communicate to the elected officials up the food chain. It's a process on the professional side where we can make sure that milestones and benchmarks are met in a timely manner on the professional side.
Yeah.
Making sure our bridge engineering team and PennDOT stay on track. And if we get off track, then we have ways of sort of bringing that, becoming kind of a
Okay, but the administration
Squeaky
of the reconstruction of the bridge is done by PennDOT, not by Amtrak or by any federal agency.
The administration of the reconstruction of the bridge is really solely the borough's responsibility.
Borough.
No, but who puts us on the priority list of PennDOT?
The list is the Transportation Improvement Program, which goes through this many-layered process that involves the county. So we've been in contact on the professional staff level with the county.
Leslie Richardson, like who?
No, Matt Edmonds, Section Chief in Montgomery County Planning Commission. So that's a good person to kind of have in your corner and let them know that why it's important, that it remain important, that it remain on where it is in line, so to speak. And we've already reached out and made those contacts, but Matt can't snap his fingers and make the project happen.
Right.
But when those important milestones come up where they start talking about what the reauthorization is going to look like, we'll make sure that Matt Edmond at the county talks to me, talks to Matt, talks to Ed, and knows how important it is.
Yeah, I do think though it's appropriate for council to collectively write a letter and ask for the commissioners, for Mary Jo, for Madeline, CC the people that Sean's referencing, and just explain why the bridge is so critical, particularly at this point in time when we have this other construction to the local economy. Additionally, I think we can point to the fact that it's an ADA issue as well in our community. There's several points that I think our voice should be heard. And perhaps that's something we can collectively agree to sign off on.
Why don't we can, as a committee, we can draft something,
Right.
and then we'll share with the other
Send it around.
council.
Yeah, no,
So
I
that's
agree.
something we can do as a committee. And if you wish to advise us on
That
that,
language.
Sean, let us know.
Mhm.
Okay. Moving on to capital plan, is there anything to discuss now, or is it something just waiting for the general meeting?
It could be discussed more at the general meeting. I've gotten very limited feedback on it so far, which is, it is what it is. And we will, I spoke with the council president, and we thought it was a good idea to just push pause on the vote and approval of that so we can talk a little bit more about it between now and the August business meeting.
Okay. Okay.
One of the bits of feedback I got that's relevant to this committee is to include dollars for parks and open space spending. So the draft that I've been fiddling around with since we last met, we last published it, was to put a dollar amount roughly equal to, actually a little bit greater than what we had allocated in prior year CIP for Narberth Park and for Save My Park. That's just one, that's an example of a kind of idea that came forward in those conversations.
Can I ask
Please,
a
go for it.
question
Just go for it.
about the parks and the capital plan, because this really straddles both input and finance
Go for it.
administration. Was there any conclusion, so we have the $40,000, $45,000 baseball net, and one of the questions was, how do people outside of Narberth use the fields, and do they pay anything to use those fields? In other words, is it appropriate for folks to cost share, or is that $45,000 that we should absorb? And that goes to the larger issue of MOUs and understanding how do people gain access to borough property. But for right now, do we have that $45,000 allocated for the baseball nets in the CIP?
Not currently, no.
Not currently. And is there any movement, I'm sorry, I won't steal any more of your time, but was there any movement, Sean, do you know, with NIDA? I think there was some talk of perhaps.
I haven't had that conversation.
Okay.
I think where we left things was a conversation between leadership and the Narberth Athletic Association
Yeah, I think.
at our last business
I think
meeting.
my sense of the council is that we were in agreement that that the borough could pay for a third, that NIDA would pay for, if NIDA was willing to pay for a third, and that we might request the NAA to pay for a third, and that would be a partnership expense.
Okay. And we had hoped in FNA to really take a deep dive into these MOUs. I'm not sure it's going to happen this summer, but that's something that, again, Bob, we should probably figure out how the committees should work together on that.
Okay. So we talk about the solid waste contract. Where are we with that, and what do you need? How do you need council to engage with the assembly of that contract, or of that proposal?
Well, I'm not going to talk too much over, Matt's work, other than to say that we're investigating how other municipalities do it, because we have some fundamental crossroads decisions to make, and we want to present those decisions to the members of council as kind of packaged decision choices, which then would lead to how we would solicit bids for collection and disposal.
Is that tonight? That discussion of choices?
No.
It's not tonight. Okay.
No.
What's the
Another
timeline?
year, don't we? What's
No.
our contract up? 9 months?
No, it's up at the end of this year.
So the timeline is.
So 6
So
months.
we intend to,
Okay.
I don't want to say accelerate, because we've been moving internally towards this target date for a while, and Matt's invested a lot of his time looking into it. And,
When does it go out for public bid?
As soon as we are confident that council's wishes are in the bid.
Okay.
And that's the step that we need to facilitate. Right now, we're still doing our due diligence in collecting data, reviewing contracts. There's, two separate things that we need to think about. First is the contract as it's written from a legal standpoint. How do we make it a much more enforceable contract, more enforceable than what we have now? And then we have the other part of it is, what do we want our trash service to be? So separate those two things. The contract as it is going to be handled by the borough solicitor. Make the contract as bulletproof as possible and enforceable with real penalties for things that shouldn't be happening. And then what do you want the bid to be? What do you envision trash service to be? That is really the driving force behind the bid. We want to hear, as the conduits to your community, you are the ones who are listening and responding. So we want to hear your ideas, what you want the trash service to be. It'd be good to have 3 different options, at least, that bidders can come in and bid on, so we can compare apples to apples.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about a reset of the scope of work. I mean, enforcement's always good, because if it's not working out, we need to be able to get out of the contractor, or there needs to be some accountability by the collector. But it sounds like you're proposing we reset the scope of work, and in some way. And is that based on the way in which trash is managed outside the borough? Is it based on where the recycling's going and where the trash is going?
All of the above.
Because in a way, as a resident, I'm speaking for my household, it works. Basically, we basically get collection twice a week. Monday we put out our trash, Thursday we put out our recycling. So I always think of it as a twice a week collection. It's a pretty good service, right? Half of it goes away on Monday and the other half goes away on Thursday.
So to that point, I believe that residents can get better service.
Do you? Okay.
Listening to 3.5 years worth of complaints, issues that we talk about.
Yeah.
I am not going to get into the specifics right now.
Okay,
it's a little
good,
premature,
good.
but I am confident that we will be able to secure better service for arguably less money.
Okay.
per resident.
Okay, so not to complicate this, however,
Oh, it's complicated.
well, I would add another layer, how's
Yeah.
that? for 18 months ago, public safety was talking about the issue of trash as a public health and safety issue. And at that time, we discussed this idea of, let's say some of the apartment complexes don't have dumpsters. So you honestly have maybe 20 trash cans that go out to the curb, which, correct me if I'm wrong, we are unique in the fact that we don't require businesses and apartments to have their own dumpsters. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so now would be the time if we were going to create some new legislation around requirements on commercial or apartment, multi-house, I don't know what that would look like, but now would be the time to do that before we go into a new contract.
Yeah, because it's all interconnected. You know, you have our garbage ordinance that is currently on our books that needs overhauling,
Absolutely.
and it all interconnects. And really, to make this 100% bulletproof and really effective, both the ordinance on our books and this contract have to mesh, and they have to be really good. No holes. Right now, they're both hole laden.
Gotcha.
So that's what we're, you know.
That's what you're working on.
Yeah,
It's great.
and,
It's
you know,
great to have the update.
I really want to have our solicitor focus on writing the contract part of it.
So you're working on the scope of work, like options.
Doing my due
And you'll
diligence,
discuss that
looking at
with
what
council.
other like-sized municipalities have in their trash.
And you'll discuss that at council when the time's right.
Yes.
And,
Okay, cool.
and I'm sorry, but in promise for things like when businesses use the Haverford Ave receptacles for their own business trash, or apartments above the businesses use the town receptacles for trash, because that's going to impact, at least it would impact what I would say we need, how many pickups we need on Haverford Ave.
Yes.
Well, if the businesses and the apartment dwellers are using our street receptacles, then we probably need 4 times a week. If we can legislate that that's not an option and we can enforce that, then that changes how I would,
Yep.
my opinion on the bid.
Well, bid would be, you know, first, all right, see, here's where it gets
They're
complicated.
interrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking
So what's
about,
the-
We
When
don't
do we
need to
need-
go down this right now. If
But-
you wanna
but
just-
when
I
do
do
we-
want you to start
Yeah.
thinking about it because
Okay.
it's important, and I want you to
Great.
come prepared to talk, hopefully next month, to talk about these level of complications.
Right.
Council needs to think, do we want to keep it as is? Do we want residential and commercial pickup provided by the borough? There's the funding mechanism, how it's currently paid for through tax. 3, do we want to separate them? Do we want it to just be residential? And then 3, if yes, if we want it to be separate residential and commercial, council can also go down the path of identifying and approving a list of commercial contractors that are allowed to be in the borough. Say 5.
Okay.
Say all commercial, any apartment dwelling unit, 3 units or larger, or a commercial retail, you have to have your own private and pay for your own trash. And here are 5 companies that you have to pick from, approved by the borough. You can do that. Currently, we don't have that. That's not how it's set up. And so we're talking about huge change, meaning how we actually manage it, what the laws on our books say,
Which is-
redefining things. And I'm not sure if we have enough time to do that. I think long view, ideally, I'd love to see that. But it's going to be a lot of work because they're both a mess, both the ordinance and the contracts. And it's going to be a lot of heavy lifting.
Well, which is why I bring it up, because I do think
Yes.
that now is the time, I mean, not at this particular meeting, but now is, we needed to probably have this resolved a year ago.
Well, 2020 hindsight, right?
Whatever. Yeah, I know.
So, but what I'm hearing you say is that you're working on the enforcement part with the solicitor,
Mhm.
and you're looking at the scope of work and thinking of options that council can take under consideration. You're entertaining the question. You're looking at solutions to these kinds of problems.
Yes.
About the overfilling of the downtown trash
Yes.
cans. And
So twofold goal, make it an enforceable contract where we have teeth, where we can
Right.
actually respond effectively. Second, to meet and hopefully exceed resident trash service. That's the goal.
Great. I do remember, just for information, I do remember years ago, like in the midst of time, conversations about the reason councils in the past had provided collection for everyone, commercial, residential, everyone, had something to do with the coming and going of the trucks. and the frequency of the coming and the going of the trucks and the various
I
comings
get that
and
too,
goings.
yep, and that's a valid argument.
That was part of it. It was like to be able to control the environment in some way.
That's a great point.
something I seem to remember.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you
I'm good.
so much for all that.
Well,
for the update on
I
that.
could fill up
That's
2
great.
hours worth of talking
No,
about.
but it's but just having a sense of like kind of what's in the works is really helpful. Yeah. Windsor Avenue Phase 2. So where are we with the parking consultant or the Windsor Avenue consultant? Like what's the status of that?
I spoke to him and gave him the feedback from our session last month, and we are going back and forth right now about what our next steps are and what that proposal will look like, what it will cost. I don't have anything to present to the committee at this meeting yet.
Are we at a point where we should be sending out a request for proposal to a variety of different parking consultants? Street engineers, transportation people, planners, or do we continue to work with this person?
I would think after the feedback that we gave, that a month later, he would have come without talking about cost, but kind of a do-over presentation.
I didn't realize we were talking about going with a different traffic engineer.
Well, no, I'm wondering, this says Windsor Avenue Phase 2 of plan development to develop a specific plan for the roadway based on the results of the meeting. Is that what they're coming with next? Are they going to come with a proposal for the roadway proper for Windsor Avenue? Or are they going to come with it? I guess I thought what was happening after they came and studied us is they were going to come back with like a catalog of options or ideas, and that they were then going to make recommendations of how to manage the installation of those options and ideas, so that we could then get going with the repaving of the road, because we would know what's happening there. And
Clarification, what are they coming back with? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Where are we?
yeah, I'm
Let's
still not
just
sure.
update on that.
Right.
Yeah, I just
No,
want to
think
know
none
what the
of
next
us-
step is.
yeah,
That's
should
all.
be.
And maybe that's as far as the conversation could go today, but just like, what is the next thing?
Yeah.
To set our expectations.
They're going to be proposing what Phase 2 is going to look like, what their deliverables will be, the timing of it, what they're going to, how long it will take, and what the cost will be to provide that to the borough.
Okay. Do we know when they're going to have it back to us, or is it like next fall, or?
Oh, no, I'm hoping by next meeting.
Oh, by August.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
What is phase 2?
Yeah, what
We'll
is
find out.
okay, so I thought
What does
that
it take us up through?
Yeah.
Phase 2 takes us up through. So phase 1 was sort of a community, an assessment of needs, maybe, and priorities. And is that accurate? And phase 2 it goes up to what point? So I know what we're talking about.
It would be a specific plan.
Okay.
It would, at the end of Phase 2, we would have something that we could then take and
Bid out
bid.
for work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we were very clear that we were looking for something dynamic that leveraged the resources of outside grants. I mean, I know those were comments that I made, that you made, that just the option of you could do 2 cars, 1 biplane was not really as developed as what we were looking for. He does understand that.
Okay, forgive me, I'm still trying to understand. Have we already contracted with them for Phase 2?
No, we have not.
Okay, so we're just waiting for a proposal from them?
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
I mean, maybe the thing to do is
Okay.
wait and see what the proposal looks like. Maybe
Yeah, I
in
guess.
specifics, right? Because it'll be pretty
Exactly.
specific, it'll be
Mhm.
presumably. And then see if it seems like, then revisit it. Can't really, it probably doesn't make sense to put time and energy into seeking the same product from other providers until we've seen, they've already done some work, let's see what
Sure.
they've got.
okay.
Based on our feedback. Does that make sense?
And I know the Conservancy came out because they did the stormwater assessment. I was talking to Maureen, and she did reiterate again that as we think about Windsor Avenue corridor, that she continues to offer to say we can leverage resources for grant money if we identify stormwater. So at some point, I hope that we strategically leverage those opportunities.
Can you just say like, yeah, we're really aware of that and the borough's committed to that?
Yeah, I actually ran into Maureen this
Okay.
morning.
Okay,
We
so
talked
just-
about this.
Right.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to hear. Okay, thanks. MS4 and pollution reduction plan. Decisions about what project. Where are we with the MS4 at this point? Does the state still have it, or does it kind of come back to the borough at this point?
The borough has to identify, and we haven't yet because we're continuing to talk about options, identify projects and locations and techniques that we're going to do to meet our pollution reduction plan. And it's a lot like everything else on this list, an extremely complicated question that we don't know all of the formulas, we don't know all the variables yet, so we're not anywhere near a solution, but I think we're starting to understand and drill down to the kinds of projects that would satisfy our requirement and that we could do that are financially feasible.
Okay.
And we've enlisted the help, and Ed's been talking with the EAC about this
Super.
effort as well.
Super.
Yeah,
What's the-
I met with the EAC and members of the Lumbering Conservancy last week to try to come up with a short list, like a tier 1 list, and then a longer duration list of obtainable goals that we can accomplish in the next 4 years, because we're on a limited time frame. So they're working diligently on that, and Lumbering Conservancy is helping with consulting and also offering funding ideas. So.
Terrific. That sounds like that's being that you're integrating the input of the EAC and the Conservancy in that with that application.
Putting them
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Great. Do either of you have any questions about that?
That's great.
And what's the status of the street light, the LED replacements?
So we had, Ed and I attended the initial rollout of their streetlight audit, which is phase 2. Phase 2 is when, I don't know if you saw any of the field folks out taking pictures of all of the streetlights and GPSing them. They were in the borough for 3, maybe 4 days, maybe 2 months ago. And then they compiled it into a web map. And then we had our initial audit review last month. And we went over all of the streetlights with them and came up with any issues, and we identified a handful of issues that they are updating the data. I touched base with them yesterday, and they still haven't finalized those updates. We do have access to the web map, and then from that point onward, we're also getting a new, an updated proposal from Pico to purchase our streetlights, because we currently do not own our streetlights. That purchase quote that we got is over 6 months old, and here they are only valid for 6 months. So it's a bureaucratic exercise. We should have that within 7 to 14 days. And then once phase 2 is complete, where we are sure that we know where all of our streetlights are, the interesting thing is if we go forward with this, Pico then uses that data and then it overrides their data. So they will have, they accept our GPS locations, they upload it into their system, and that becomes the official record. So that's why it's really important for us to make sure we actually know where all of our streetlights are. Phase 3 is construction, and I'm not in a position to recommend that as of yet, since I haven't seen the finalized phase 2 audit. And Mike Fuller from Keystone Lighting Solutions will also be here to present those findings in more detail, including costs, financing, all of those things. Return on investment. I'm pretty confident that it will be worthwhile, a really significantly worthwhile investment to purchase, and to retrofit.
And what's the timeline? Like, by when should we? expect
We were
to see-
hoping to get the finalized phase 2 by mid-August, I believe it was. Yeah. So we should be having these conversations about progressing to phase 3, the end of August to the beginning of September. And it's a pretty quick turnaround time for construction also.
So this is happening
Yes.
soon.
Yes.
Super.
Yep. And it really, we are unique in that we don't own our streetlights. And so that's the only wrinkle in that we have to also, it's a separate step that we have to go through a purchase agreement with PECO. So that's going to prolong it just a bit.
Okay. Is there any negotiation that has to go on with PECO, or is it pretty
No
much the standard?
negotiations, they tell you how much they will sell them for. And you go, okay. And they will tell you which utility poles they will sell to you
And they're
also.
fair?
I am not in a position to answer that.
Yeah.
I don't know what fair is, they're different.
regulated.
What's interesting is that many of them, and this is what Mike Fuller from Keystone said, I think we set a record for the percentage of all of our streetlights that are from 1920, like the original screw-in light bulb. There's a few of them on Conway that
I
you
wonder
can
if they'd be
see.
willing to gift them to us.
If you look at the
Seriously.
quote, they're almost
They're
gifting
almost
them.
paid, they're already paid for, in a way. We were gifted a beautiful bridge by
Yeah.
the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's where we stand with
That's
that.
super, that's great. Sabine Avenue, Sean, when should we begin to see something of the RFP?
Well, a draft's been put together, but it needs to be discussed with
Okay,
Council President and you, and I'm sure by next month, if we get that meeting done between now and then, we'll have it to this committee. That's how you.
so by
it's
our
going.
next committee meeting, we could look at it.
Mhm.
So we're going to want the timing on, certainly we're not going to allocate funds in the CRP with Savon, and we have an RFP coming out.
I think we already did allocate roofing.
Well, the roofing, okay, I'm sorry, I should say, we're not going to allocate anything other than safety and immediate ADA issues to Savon.
That's what I agree.
Right, given that we have an RFP coming out, so we're
Yeah,
not
right.
investing on improvements beyond safety and ADA when hopefully we are re-envisioning that space.
I mean, that's clear to you all that that's our feeling about that.
Yeah, capital, my charge is capital investment to repair sidewalks, concrete, ADA ramps, to get a low-cost paving solution for the parking lot and to repair the roof. Other than that, we're just doing maintenance on the facility. Now, things are breaking.
Sure.
That's right, yeah.
Three,
We need the RFP, yeah.
three air conditioning units
That's-
broke in the daycare facility.
So at the
That's the
next
risk.
meeting, will we go over the RFP?
Hmm?
What's the timeline on when council will review the RFP?
I think Sean, my understanding is Sean's just saying that by next infrastructure meeting, we'll have a first look at something.
Okay.
So then we'll decide
Okay.
if we want to keep working on that or whether we want to take it to council.
Great.
So it's not.
So but you'll
next
be,
month.
you and Aaron will be arguing with him prior
Well,
to
I
that, correct?
think Aaron
Can I get it a little bit?
Aaron wants to look at what we're going to look at as a group.
And if possible, I mean, we'll circulate it before the meeting, right?
Let's plan to do that.
Yeah, because it'll probably be
I think that's reasonable.
they're probably complicated.
That's reasonable. Absolutely. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us should be looking at it for the first time when we sit down at the table.
Correct.
We should have time to review it ahead of time so we can have a thoughtful discussion. Absolutely. Is that good with you too, Sean?
Mhm.
Okay. And then implementation of the parking plan. Where are we and kind of what's the next step? And is there something for council to do in regard to that project?
Well, I think I'm asking the same question of council.
Okay. So what's the question?
Exactly what you said.
Okay. So let's talk about the parking plan. my understanding is that there's a lot of, like, there's the technology of the parking control and enforcement, which is like the way you identify who's not parking legally and fine them, right?
My ask is even more fundamental than that.
Yes,
It's like,
it's mine.
how, who, and when
Yeah.
are we talking about this?
Yeah, can I interject?
How is it going to work?
Okay, so that's why I was asking
Yeah.
what the question is.
Can I ask my question? Because parking was, I thought, assigned to public safety. So Gigi, the chair of public safety, and you presented a parking plan, what was that, 4 months ago?
I've seen the parking.
Yes, it was at the public safety meeting. It was suggested that we move to the $50 and you have to call on the plates. All hell broke loose.
That wasn't there wasn't
It was
a
a
plan,
discussion of, this is what,
but there was not a plan. Council
okay,
didn't
there
see
was
a
an
plan.
introduction of an idea, all hell broke loose, and then we never talked about it again.
I think, but we brought it to council simply to fill in some gaps in a resolution to support the ordinance so that the office could move forward with enforcement. And we just plugged in zeros because it was the easiest thing to move
Right.
forward, but we have not reassigned a responsibility. So it still sits with public safety, and it's really Aaron's decision, I think, to make those kinds of
Okay,
assignments of
but at this
responsibility.
time, like, we're not hearing from the public, there's no hue and cry. We don't have a
Right.
block of people here saying we're having problems
Sure.
parking on our block. There's no one coming in and saying something's broken at this moment. So is it safe to assume that the parking controls are going on, that the enforcement notices are being issued, that,
I think this needs a discussion with
I'm just
Aaron.
asking.
No, I mean, it's about where this fits in priorities and whether or not Aaron wants to reassign,
How did we prioritize it?
So it's one of our priorities that we voted on in January. This is one of the buckets. And I would say it is broken, and we paid $87,000 to consultants who told us it's broken, it's antiquated, it doesn't make sense. And now that data is soon going to be outdated. Moreover, I think it's incredibly important for us to establish those 2-hour zones appropriately before we have the construction on the apartments. So
I think you gotta be very careful about declaring it broken. A lot has changed, even in the past year, about the way in which the parking management is taking place and occurring. It's very different now in the borough, and the way parking is being managed and controlled than it was when this study was written. It's very, very different now, in my sense, my estimation.
So you think that evaluation is already?
No, I don't know whether it is or not. No, I think the pinch points are still probably the pinch points. The problem areas are still probably problem areas. But what I'm saying is that we now have like a legal way for guests to obtain permits.
Yeah, I'm
We
not
have
talking
a
about
way
management.
that the parking enforcers going around town
We
and
do.
scanning
We do
plates
much
and
better.
getting collections and then,
Right.
and I think there's probably greater compliance, and I think people are thinking twice about not feeding meters, and, you know, it's a much different environment than it was, say, in 2011, when you could just park all day anywhere.
Sure, and I guess-
never be
yeah.
concerned about getting a ticket.
I was talking more 30,000. What the report came back, it said, we really have no guiding parking philosophy.
There was a big picture in that report
Yeah.
that said, these regulations have rolled out over the years piecemeal. They're probably not ideal the way your zones are configured. Moreover, you could think about using parking to support other policy
Right.
goals of the borough, such as traffic calming or encouraging residents to use driveways by painting
Right.
parking lots. So, I mean, those were big picture things, but I don't think this
Well, I
committee
assume
today
the
has a
implementation of the
role
parking
to play in
plan
that.
was to consolidate the zones into 3 zones and to eliminate, I guess I assumed that was happening, but maybe that's not happening.
It's happening at all.
I don't think we've done anything with
So why don't you guys tell us what's happening? Where are we? And like, what's different? What's the same? What's like kind of what would you recommend?
What's different is that we're using a new system for enforcement, which is almost entirely, it's like Play-Doh plastic. You can make it almost anything you want it to be. You can create permits of varying durations and varying costs. The permitting system is license plate based. the only idea, you just posed a question, and it was the same question that posed to us back in April. And we did go through the parking study and came up with, 6 or 7 recommendations to discuss in public safety. And here we are. I think maybe what I'm hearing from you, Bob, too, is that the way parking supply is being managed right now with its demand and supply and our enforcement system is we don't have acute problems, systemic acute problems. We have pinch points.
Pinch point, that's what the study said. And I think somehow the effective enforcement has created an effect. It's also been effective deterrent to people who are willfully violating the parking rules.
Yeah, and it's different now.
That's different. There's a different environment in my view.
So I guess, and this was a conversation that we started in Public Works. So my first comment is, I think we need to ask this question again at council and say parking was identified, it was assigned to public safety. There was a beginning of a discussion in April. We got tremendous feedback from the community and nothing has happened since.
Well, maybe we should ask public safety what their recommendation is.
What the recommendation,
You're on the
absolutely.
committee, what was your recommendation?
I was sick that meeting.
You had one
So
meeting.
one meeting, all hell broke loose, it has never been discussed again.
So
And I
it
was
sounds
absent.
like public safety dropped the ball then.
So the second comment is, and this was one that when I was
Just throw them
managing
under the
it
bus, it's okay.
in Public Works, and I'll say it again, I think it is incredibly important that before these apartments come up, we make it very clear that the apartment has one parking spot. You will not get a 2-hour zone pass. You can bike, train, pay for parking in the apartment, not have a car, or, park in Acme and walk to your house. Like,
Why is that apartment building our concern? I mean, that's in their agreement with the borough. There's a conditional use agreement.
It's our concern in that I want people who rent to have a clear understanding that they're not going to be able to park on Forest Ave.
Well, they're going to get a ticket if they do.
They are, but I think we should
I
let
believe
folks know.
all of the apartment plans are on metered streets, so
Or-
there are no 2 hours.
Are there
But there
2
are
hour
some
zones?
2-hour zones with the street over.
But they can't, you can only get a permit if you live on a 2-hour zone.
Right, so those are stuff, but there's
None of
streets
them fall
the
on-
second over, right? So like
They
Forest is a
wouldn't-
2-hour
But
zone,
what I'm
but
saying is the
Woodbine's
apartment building is not, the apartment
have to
building's
be
not
on
in a
that block.
spot that
Right.
has a 2-hour zone, so you can't apply for a parking permit.
Right, so you go 3 streets over to a non-2-hour zone.
No. Yeah, right.
Right, so that's what I want to protect, is that you understand. I think we should just be,
It could be. I mean, if there's going to be, the way this has happened historically is like as the cars move around, the neighbors let us know that there's a problem or not a problem. They let you know pretty quickly if there's a problem. And then we have a technology now that's so flexible that we can easily address those problems. Am I wrong about that? Or is that correct?
We have the technology that is used to enforce, but we have a disjointed philosophy. Our ordinance is all over the place. We have no shared vision, and that's what that parking study did. It kind of gave us a vision. And so what we did, we took a crack at interpreting that vision and proposing a rollout of a new parking vision. And that's what kind of fell flat.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a little gun shy after
How did it
that.
fall flat if we I never even got like a sort of coherent presentation about it?
It didn't even get past
No.
committee.
It did.
Well, so what's the committee doing now? Does the committee just wash their hands of it, or is it still part of that? Is it on our agenda?
Parking has
It's
not
not
been
on
on the
our
agenda
agenda.
since April.
Oh, well
I don't know why
then,
we're-
we shouldn't be talking about it.
It's a big project, you know? and
So I think
does need
it's just
attention.
either has to
And
be
it's-
done it has to be done by the public safety committee, or the council president has to be
Resign
assigned.
it. And I do think, it's hot and I'm tired, but I'm so frustrated about saying it's a big project and then we're paralyzed.
Well, there's nothing for us to do at this
There's plenty
point.
of other big projects.
In
we can
general.
talk about.
In general.
That was our last item anyway.
Okay.
So now it's 5:52, we're gonna end the meeting 8 minutes early.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought it
No,
was
no,
at
it was so
5:30.
bad. We were originally 5:30 FNA,
I got it.
and then Bob said, no, we really do need to meet. And
Mistake.
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. The meeting's adjourned. Thank